Hi, and welcome to Unblinded, a clinical trial podcast. I am Manny Vasquez, Senior Director of Clinical Data Strategy here at Viva. And today I am joined by two phenomenal guests. I have to my right, Denali Rose and Mr. Joe Lengfellner. Thank you both for joining me here today. I really appreciate it. Now, for those who don't know who either of you are, as well as I might, why don't we start with you, Denali? Can you just give a quick background? Who are you? How'd you get to where you are? What's your journey look like?
Yeah, so Denali Rose, I currently am a VP of Site Solution Strategy at Viva, so I work on the site technology space. My background has really been in healthcare IT, specifically clinical trials, for the past decade, working with sites. So how do we support sites through technology and associated services? So I spent a couple of times at a couple of different companies doing that, and I'm excited to be here at Viva. I also co-host a podcast, Note to File, which is a clinical research podcast as well. And so that's where we get up and run our mouths about clinical trials and help bring new perspectives and new voices to the industry.
And Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Also a big fan. Great job.
Thank you.
So Joe Lengfellner from Memorial Sloan Kettering. So I get to wear a couple of interesting hats at MSK. I'm the senior director for our clinical research informatics team. I'm responsible for all the technology we use in our clinical trials program at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Also in a newer hat, I lead our clinical research innovation consortium. So this is where we're looking for what's next in clinical research, technology, and innovation, putting these technologies through their paces, and seeing what works and what doesn't. I've been at MSK for 17 years in the clinical trial space the entire time, and just really driven to improve the industry from a tech perspective. And yeah, there's plenty of work to be done.
Yes, there is.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. That's the Innovation Consortium is really interesting, and we should come back and we should talk about that. But one of the first things I wanted to kind of dig into with both of you is just the day-to-day site life at a research center for a typical research coordinator. That's what they do. They come in, they are planning their day, they have patients coming in, they are working on trials, and maybe, from the perspective first, maybe of a larger cancer center like Memorial Sloan Kettering, you guys are worldwide, premier cancer, oncology research center. What does that look like for, research coordinator at Memorial? And then maybe denying in your experience and all the work that you've done with sites, like what's the day-to-day for, your partner, Brad? He's got, he has a site of his own, much smaller than that of Memorial. So like, what's a day in the life of those coordinators? So Joe.
Yeah, happy to talk about this. So we have a very large clinical trials program at MSK, about 1,900 studies. So it's a large portfolio, all oncology, as you mentioned. So we have just an army of research coordinators that are keeping the trains running. For them, the day really, it depends on the day. It changes day to day. So the vast majority of their time spent on data curation. So taking data from our clinical records and moving it down to EDC systems, to sponsors, other research systems. But they're managing patients. They're talking to their investigator, clearing up clinical questions, talking to their sponsors, responding to queries. So the day really differs every day for them, and it's a really challenging role. I think it's underappreciated in the industry, and we need to work to make that a more attractive career opportunity for people.
I think for smaller sites, it's chaotic, right? You have them doing everything. You have coordinators recruiting patients. They're doing regulatory, they touch a lot because there's just not people there. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
the amount of it's almost like a sales job too. Like you're recruiting the patients, you're trying to get them on the clinical trial. When they're on the clinical trial, then you're doing the clinical trial work. You're pulling labs, you're drawing blood, you're doing all that stuff, and then you're doing the regulatory, you're working with finance to make sure they know things are happening. It's chaotic, it's challenging. I think it's, like you said, one of the most undervalued positions we have.
Yeah.
And underappreciated.
Is there, so for a coordinator at Memorial, would you say that perhaps they actually would wear less hats than maybe that of someone at, one of the smaller sites who is one person trying to manage,
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that Denali just
Yeah,
mentioned.
potentially. So in some of our larger services where we have, 50, 60, 70 trials, we will have very specialized roles created for these coordinators. So there are some coordinators that 100% of their role is data management. So all day they're moving data from the clinical records into EDC systems, responding to queries, et cetera. A tough job.
We should have mentioned we're here at Summit. We're here in Boston, and Joe, you and I just did a session on EHR to EDC integration, and one of the metrics that you shared was that coordinators these days more or less spend just as much time managing data as they do managing patients. And from what you just described, it sounds like in some specialty areas, like the managing of the data is the full-time job.
Yep. Yes, exactly. That's, on average, they spend about half and half, let's say. But for those specialized data managers, yeah, that's their day. And, some of them enjoy it. There is a, an opportunity to get in that role if you like, looking at clinical data, working with data. But yeah, for the majority, it is, jumping between different EDC systems, different sponsors, responding to queries, responding to emails from CROs, asking about when, upcoming data locks and when is the data going to be ready. And that is their day.
Well, that's what I think is so challenging about some of that. Like the specialization almost I like because it's like you find someone, they like it, they want to get into it. When you have someone doing all those things, like you're looking for a unicorn, like someone who's gonna be like, hey, I can talk to patients, I can relate to you, I have those people skills, I can convince you, I can explain simply what a clinical trial is, I can draw your blood effectively. I can also manage the data. I understand tech. I can work the systems. I understand the financial impact of it. So it's like, how do you find one person who's going to do all of that well?
Yeah, and I actually had heard from other site owners that it's almost easier to find someone who has more like business and tech savviness or background and teach them to draw blood than it is to find a nurse and teach them all the other things. So you actually wind up with perhaps like with someone who's like their heart's not in that, right? They're a business and tech person. Like this is, you're teaching them to draw blood. This is a job for them that they can do, and that's great.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily something that they're passionate about.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I mean, I think it could be both. I mean, I think maybe there are people who you could train one way or the other. They might be slightly weaker in that side of things. But again, that's why I think you're gonna have like, and this is why I think getting to some of that specialization kind of makes sense. Like I know I've talked to some site owners who are like, maybe I have just like a patient recruitment specialist. And so it's not necessarily even a coordinator, like you're kind of pulling or a consent expert or something, trying to pull some of that around, but maybe.
I think this is a debate that I've had at conferences like this in the past with other sites where, some, I'm coming from the AM, the large academic medical center perspective here. Some do have very specialized roles like MSK, but
Yeah.
a lot of sites do keep it more, sort of non-specialized. And there's the debate of, which role is more rewarding to the employee, what type of role are they going to stay in longer? They may enjoy data management, but that I think is something you can burn out on relatively quickly. And that's a real challenge in our industry of the turnover in these coordinator roles and the cost and delay that adds into the clinical trial process.
Yeah. Something that I wanted to talk to you both about was the idea of basically sites now taking it upon themselves to better their own processes through the use of technology because it's just now available to them. Where I think for a long time it was you basically got what the sponsor gave you because you couldn't afford your own, and you just you got what you got and you didn't get upset, and or you did. But I think, and Joe, this is a good example, I think, is for you guys at Memorial. One of the things that you're really putting a lot of effort into now is it's eSource, right? It's EMR to EDC integration. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, a little bit more about what Memorial's doing. And then, Denali, I'd love to hear your take on that same thing, but maybe translated down to a smaller research site, doesn't have an EMR, doesn't have the war chest maybe that, a large academic center might have, how they're thinking about digitizing their workflows. But I'd love to talk more EMR with you.
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. So yeah, for several years now, a priority for Memorial Sloan Kettering has been to get better at how we manage data. We know the current state is not scalable. We want to do more clinical trials. We want to bring more opportunities to patients. We can't do that in the current paradigm. Clinical trials are getting more complex. They're requiring more data, generating more queries. We can't scale in the current state. So looking at EMR to EDC, EHR to EDC has been a real priority for us, using that existing clinical data and moving it directly to the EDC system so that those data managers don't have to spend their day copying and pasting data. We're working with a vendor, Ignite Data, that's helping us utilize the FHIR resources, and this is a little technical, but the APIs, the data integration points that are available in EHRs today, and pull that data out and push it directly into EDCs so that coordinators don't have to manually move that data. So FHIR is basically a technical standard that allows us to to exchange data between systems.
I think from a smaller site perspective, like don't care about EHR to EDC interaction because again, like small sites, they don't have EHRs, and I think especially if you're not doing oncology, I think oncology is one where like that makes a lot of sense because you have all of those values that you need to move over. But even for other things, like there's so much data that's not in the EHR that. So you can get what, like 40% of the data from your EHR, even if you're working with a site that has an EHR, and then you still have all this other stuff you have to manually put in. And so I think the smaller site perspective, that integration, I just have not heard it's particularly powerful. What they're most focused on is if they're going digital, it's eSource, right? So you're using an eSource vendor, but then it's almost like identical duplicate document, like because you have the eSource with your forms. And then you have the EDC, which you also have to put the forms in. So it's the exact same thing, they're just entering twice. So it's the integration between eSource and EDC, which becomes more powerful. Ideally, you don't have to have two systems at one point. Like ideally, there's this idea, like you just have, I don't know, eSource, EDC, whatever name we want to call it, but you have one system.
Yeah.
And like that's where you just go to enter it. If you instead of like putting it here, so I have my source documents from when the FDA comes, these are my source, whatever. And then there's the EDC, like ideally it's just one, but
Yeah.
that's what they're doing. Otherwise, I mean, there are certainly where it's like, no, I'll just do paper. I'm fine. I'm fine with paper.
I think it's important sometimes to differentiate for people on different sides of the fence on what you mean or what we mean when we say e-source, because a lot of people will look at that and say anything that's electronically sourced, right? EMR, eCOAs, wearables, whatever is e-source. But I think from when a site is thinking about e-source, you're thinking about your source documentation, that when you are executing a trial, when you're participating on a protocol, you are required to capture that data in a source document and maintain that source document. And for a long time, that document has always been paper. And so when you refer to e-source, you're talking about an electronic version of that source. And so I think it's important to differentiate that out for folks. But then also, to your point, right, when you are building, I had this conversation with the owner of a site, or a site director from a site last year, smaller, kind of like maybe mid-size, right? Not too small, but it's certainly not an academic center, where they were describing to me the process that they have. They have a central team that manages their e-source development for all the protocols that they work on. And when she was describing this process to me, you could have taken her and put her into like a data management group and have someone describe how they build an EDC database. It is word for word exactly the same.
Yeah.
I said, it sounds like you're building an EDC, and you basically are. And when you ask what the difference is between what they're collecting in that source that they're building and what the sponsor is asking them to collect in the EDC, for the most part, especially for the smaller sites, there is no difference.
Identical.
Which then really brings the case for direct data capture, whether it's EMR integration or just I'm typing this into one thing, sponsor gets what they need, and at some point at the end, you would just get your source PDF output to stash somewhere.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I mean, but it's wild. It's especially for some sites who aren't big, like the lift to actually develop some of those, because now we're not providing source, right? It's like saying, hey, figure out how we want to build this in your eSource system. And so they're not even getting that from the sponsor. They're saying like they have to build it themselves within their eSource system.
I would say that's a challenge even
Oh,
at MSK, where we have multiple teams that are taking the clinical trial, the protocol document, the clinical trial, and building it in different systems. There, if it's our study, we're building it in the EDC. We're building a CTMS representation of the calendar for billing and invoicing. We're building it into Epic for the treatment plans. So there's multiple teams that are building different representations of the trial. It's very duplicative.
How do you handle that with amendments?
Oh, it's a mess.
Okay. That's what I thought.
It's very challenging, and it adds
Woof.
so much opportunity for deficiencies and delays in the
Miss it,
process.
yeah.
So it doesn't sound like that would be, I mean, you still have an issue from a smaller site e-source perspective, largely akin to what a sponsor would be doing in an amendment for their EDC.
Yeah.
Maybe it's actually more of a mess. It sounds like for you, Joe, that seems like a lot of, is that something else that you're looking at as far as like how to streamline and it sounds like the sponsor problem of the, various systems and data in different places. And
Yeah, it's how to coordinate all the work across these different teams as amendments come online. We have to update the treatment plan in our EHR system. We need to make sure the e-consent is up to date. We need to make sure our CTMS is now, aligns with the new amendments, so we're invoicing properly. We have a whole team that tracks just the amendments to our studies, because there are just so many. There are hundreds of amendments a month that we're managing.
yeah, that's interesting. And we mentioned that we're here at Summit, and one of the things that I think is always an important topic of conversation when we're talking about sites is the relationship that they have with their sponsors, the relationship that they have with their CROs. And there are both here, and so I'm just curious from both of you, I think spent a good amount of time in the site track, which was new this year.
Yeah.
I hope it went really well.
It's been a while. It's been great.
How that conversation has gone. For better, for worse, like let's try not to beat up too bad. But
Yeah.
I hope that's the intention, right? Is there's very often discussions that are had amongst sponsors in a bubble, and then sites at conferences in a bubble. The intention is to kind of put everyone at the same table and say, what is the challenge that you're having? How could we do this better? Have we done that? Have we moved the needle a little bit over the last 2 days?
I think so. I've talked to a couple of different folks in like across sponsors, across sites, and granted, this is everyone who's in the site zone. So the sponsors who are in the site zones are probably going to be more attuned to sites, right? Just the folks who happen to be represented in that sponsor population. But I think the general like overarching theme that I've seen, I'd be interested to hear what you thoughts are on this, but like sites are super excited that sponsors are there listening, and they seem to care and they want to hear about what they have to say. And then the sponsors on the flip side are like, hey, we're really excited that sites are here and they want to talk to us. And it's this general like, it's almost like this, like we had no idea that we wanted to talk to each other. But when they do, and they're like, oh my gosh, you actually care? It's not just me. It's like, oh my God, I care. You also care. And so it's been like this interesting, I don't know, realization or sort of like awakening to be like, oh yeah, we do want to talk to each other. And I think the other thing is, and especially from the sites, that I've talked to, the general thought process is like, hey, sponsors are willing to like be okay to be like, yeah, we're not perfect. You know what I mean? Like sites are very, I don't know what your experience is, generally very willing to say like, I'm a mess, right? Like everyone shares a lot of that. But they're hearing the sponsor like, yeah, I know we don't have this. We would also like to see this. And so not trying to be this like, no, we have everything together. We're perfect little like picture. And like having that like open, transparent dialogue, I think has been really cool to see across the different folks who I've talked to.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the past 2 days have been great. And it really started with the Peter's keynote yesterday. I think one of the very first things he mentioned was the number of sites that were in attendance. I think it's over 100.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, it's been great. I've seen it grow over the past three years. I think I've been coming to Summit, and each year there's more and more sites, and there's been more and more opportunity for talking between site sponsors and CROs. I had the opportunity to present during the ClinOps track yesterday, talking about how can sites and sponsors work more closely together. What are some strategies we can use? And it was a very well attended session. And I got great questions afterwards. So yeah, I mean, 100%. The sponsors and are here, and CROs are here to listen, and have been taking the feedback that we've been giving.
I'm curious, some of the strategies that you shared, in the
Yeah.
session.
Well, I mean,
If you want to summarize, we're limited on time, but
well, I think the session is recorded, so you can see the long version. But I mean, the first thing I started with was give sites the opportunity to do sessions like that I'm standing here in front of you all today. So just elevating that site voice, listening to what they have to say, and not just I think it's been a sort of a buzzword of site centricity, and sponsors like to say they're site centric. What I've seen as a shift in the industry the past couple of years is sponsors actually mean it now. It's not just a talking point that they put on a slide, but I see the actual shift, and one of the areas I'm seeing that shift is letting sites pick the technology that works for them, things that are already embedded in their workflow that they're using day to day, that they feel comfortable using. And that was, one of the strategies I hit on as well, is that if sites have tech that works for them, everybody benefits if you support their use of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's interesting. The whole like site so, like BYOT concept, I think, is incredibly important. I just think it's fascinating because I think it is true, and it's now becoming more of a real thing that they're supporting sites. I mean, how many conferences have you gone to where it's like site centric and you're like, there's 2 sites in
Yep.
a room of 300 people? Like, what do you mean you're site centric? But I think if it's becoming more real that is site centric, the tech one is interesting to me. Like, I'm seeing a little bit, and I think maybe smaller sites have less pull. Like, and I think you see that across the board where it's like, hey, this is my budget template. We're using it. Use it. Like, and it's like, as MSK, you can come, they'd be like, okay, we want you on the trial. If you're running 20 trials, you don't really have the suasion with the sponsors to sort of push your weight around because you don't have weight because you're small. And I think tech can sometimes be similar.
Do you think there's a opportunity for the larger sites that may have some more leverage in certain circumstances to help out other
Yeah.
sites?
Well, so that's fascinating. Yes, I do. And I think that's another thing from Summit has been not just bringing sites and sponsors together, but bringing different site types together.
Mhm.
Like we've had a lot of large AMCs, there's a lot of just independent sites. And I think even those conversations have been interesting to say, like, before it's been like more, you know, bifurcated. Like you go to this conference or you go to AACI and we go to SOS. Like it's like we don't those groups don't talk, but is there an element for like those groups to come together and advocate
Yeah.
for each other?
I definitely think there is, and I think it's almost a responsibility. So I'm very lucky at MSK to have a team of clinical research informatics specialists.
Mhm.
Like that's not a luxury that a lot of sites have. So I really take it very seriously to say, well, the work we do here at MSK, it can't just stay at MSK. We need to share this work with other sites, with the industry as a whole, so that more people can benefit from it.
I think it's interesting what you said around. I think there is an opportunity that larger academic centers and just larger sites in general can not just advocate for, but also learn from some of the there are the majority of research sites out there, right? The large majority of research sites are the smaller sites that are doing 20 or fewer studies. On the day 0, we had the workshop with a site sponsor collaboration. It was a really good workshop, but there was someone at my table. I don't recall what site she was from, but it was a large center. It wasn't a small site. And during some of the conversation, the fact that the majority of research sites out there that are small don't have EMR systems. She was in it for a long time. She's 20 plus years in research, and that was a surprise to her that there were like any research sites that didn't use electronic medical records.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I think even amongst that community, there might be a disconnect between the larger sites and some of the smaller. And like you guys are all same team, right? Same. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there. The tech thing is also interesting, not just technology, but just like services in general. It seems that sponsors are getting a little bit more open to, if you as a site have the ability to, let's say, do your own telehealth. If you have coordinators who don't mind driving to a patient's house to do some things, and the patient's open to that, to allow for that. If you have the capability to deliver drug from your pharmacy or something like that, you don't need a special vendor from a sponsor on a study to do those types of things. And a sponsor doesn't necessarily have to feel obligated to give it to you. Maybe they want to have one as an option for those who don't, but to at least allow for you as a site to opt to use your own tools or services if you have the ability would just open up like much more your ability to do better work, but even your ability to work and recruit more patients, because it just gives you more options.
Yeah.
And that's not like a DCT thing necessarily. I mean, it kind of was born out of that, but it's, a lot of sites were just like, I don't need you to give me this. I have it already. It's actually an inconvenience
I don't want
for
your-
me to use it.
I don't even.
Yeah. So things like that, do you find are coming along more as opportunities in, I guess particularly on the smaller side of things, that there are becoming more options to at least use some of the tools you have, or they have?
Yes. Yes and yes. I mean, I think there is more of the ability, like if you have it, you can certainly use it. And like, I mean, it's not even just tech, like central recruitment campaigns, like all of those things, like you have the ability to push back a little bit more. And I think sponsors are becoming a little bit more open to that and like letting you kind of fit your own operations into it a little bit. But I think it probably varies pretty significantly based on sponsor, based on CRO, what they're willing to do. And I also think there's like a worry sometimes from like the CRO sponsor. I'd say like, no, you have to use these tools because they have a chunk of sites who maybe aren't great performers. And so I don't want to then have to just all of a sudden like give them the option to opt out. Does that make sense? Where it's
Yeah.
like, whereas like you've seen sites who like don't recruit patients, who miss-screen like they're not all sites are created equal. That's okay. But then how do they manage to make sure we're giving everyone equal tools while we're still trying to like help and support them, but not let them tank themselves? So it's like a weird.
I guess there's an opportunity. So for a site that may not have access to a technology yet, for a sponsor to bring that to a CRO, to bring that to the table and say, hey, this is available for you to use. Let us help you get set up, build it into your processes, educate you on how to use it. And that, may be, something that the site was not aware of previously.
Yeah, maybe like to take an easy example is like e-consent, something like that, where a lot of sponsors have tried to bring on an e-consent for a specific trial, and in a site's effort to digitize its own practices, they may have brought on their own e-consent tool, because this was also one of the more mind-blowing things for a data manager was sites have SOPs too,
Weird.
and they're like, wait, what? They don't just follow the CCGs that I give them, and that's how they do the study. So I mean, you have those, like a simple tool like an e-consent, like you might already have a workflow for that, and it's part of your day-to-day processing. You do the same thing for all your trials. I think that's low-hanging fruit that a sponsor can say like, well, if you got one, you use that.
Oh, and absolutely should, because even if they don't have, like, even if they have paper, they do paper consent, and one sponsor is like, here's an e-consent, use it for my trial, and they're trying to digitize, but then you still are running, a small site, you're running 20 trials still, right? You have one that has e-consent in this platform, two that have e-consent in this platform, and then the rest are paper. And so you have a coordinator who's maybe working on all of those, and it's like, which one do I have to remember to do? So it's like, I'm just gonna keep everything paper. So even if they don't have their own system,
Right.
the operationalization of it may still not be better for them to be digital.
It's almost like they want to simplify and standardize their
Almost.
workflow for themselves, even if it doesn't
Well, and
quite.
that's why like site tech is so important, because you can use it across your portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's very disruptive when, so our coordinators, they work on 4 to 8 probably studies on average. Very disruptive when they're, 7 out of 8 of those studies are using one e-consent platform, and a sponsor, dictates that for that one study, they have to use that. You're not going to, that sponsor is not going to get the benefits of an e-consent platform, because their coordinators are going to be bouncing around between systems, and they're going to end up making more errors. So yeah, I think there's a real argument to say, if something's working for a site, let them use it.
So Joe, I want to come back to something you mentioned at the beginning, which sounded really neat. So I wanted to ask you about it. It was in a
Clinical Research Innovation Consortium.
Yes.
Yeah.
CRIC. Yes. And that's something that you do at Memorial. Tell me more about it.
Yeah. Well, so we started at Memorial, but it's really meant to look at clinical trial innovation across the industry. So not just make change at MSK, not just make changes at large AMCs, but really, help move the needle on innovation in clinical research. So this started at MSK. It really came out of our work around the EHR-to-EDC, actually, where we partnered very closely with our vendor Ignite Data on this problem, and through this joint collaboration, realized that, well, we're giving feedback to a vendor, to the industry, and helping them iterate on this solution so that we can continue to improve it, and then share the outcomes of that improvement with a larger audience. So we thought that was repeatable for other industry-wide problems, clinical trial recruitment, looking at the decentralized trials and how what model might work there, drug delivery, et cetera. And so trying to look for innovations that we can go after with technology and do it in partnership. So this is a consortium where we're adding additional sites. We're having sponsors are joining us, technology providers, regulators, all working together to solve these industry-wide problems.
That's awesome. What I know, I see you
More
have
questions?
teed up.
Yeah.
The first thing I wanted to ask was, if anyone was interested, sponsors, sites, if they, is this like open enrollment? Are you open to
Yeah, absolutely.
so if anyone wanted to, if anyone was interested in
Please
checking in with you?
reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to set up a call and tell you more in detail about what the work we're doing.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Denali, I saw you had it.
It was a very similar-ish question, but like as far as like the site representation there, is it mostly AMCs, or are you working with like health systems and smaller sites as well, or is that
All of the above. So
Okay.
this consortium started a little over a year ago. So we're still growing, still new, but have had all, sites of all sizes joining us. So yeah, it's been really cool.
Are there any current projects going on that you're particularly excited about outside the EMR-EDC? You mentioned, what was it? Recruitment you mentioned, payments maybe.
Yeah, so clinical trial recruitment, clinical trial matching is probably the area after EHR-to-EDC that we're furthest along with. I mean, you both know that this problem, this clinical trial matching technology has been out there for a while, and we, just like EHR-to-EDC, we haven't really seen movements in sort of solving that problem. So we're looking at a few different vendors and putting them through. One of the criteria of working within this CRIC group is it's very metrics driven. So when we work with a new solution, we're predefining the success metrics that sort of move you through the program. And for solutions that don't hit those metrics, we'll help them improve the solution. But if it doesn't work, we're not going to implement a solution that doesn't work. And so we're starting to see some real progress on clinical trial matching using large language models to work with clinical data and matching them to the inclusion-exclusion criteria of a trial.
It's for patient identification and recruitment, because I know that I spoke to a gentleman earlier today. Like health equity was a big problem and a big focus of his, and I think something like that can through the use of big data, large language models, AI, all those fun things that we love to talk about now, could really go a long way though in both matching patients for trials, but also like pulling out patients that maybe someone wouldn't have originally identified or whatever the case is. We hear that a lot, health equity and just patient diversity in trials in general. I don't know if at Memorial, if you guys have any, I mean, I imagine your patient population is fairly large, but do you guys have similar issues with just identifying?
Yeah, we do, because I mean today this is a manual process that it's easy to miss a patient that would be a good fit for a trial. The technology we're looking at in this space. So I mentioned we use a metrics driven approach to evaluate these different solutions. So what we did in this case is we gave the vendor a month's worth of patients and gave them 3 trials. And we knew going in the patients that were manually matched to those trials, we gave them those patients, but we also gave them hundreds of other patients that weren't matched and said, okay, work with this data and show us what you come up with. So they found all the patients that our coordinators had found, which was a good first step. But they also found a couple of patients that our coordinators hadn't identified. So these were patients that potentially could have been given a trial opportunity, but because it was a manual process, we missed them. So it goes to show, how technology can really play a huge role in a clinical trial.
I think these companies are so like I worked at a patient recruitment company for a couple of years, so I have some like very
Okay.
near and dear to a lot of the things, and I find it fascinating because so many of them like don't work great.
No. Yep.
Like you look at like the space, and it's like they're not using. It has to be discrete data, or they're not using. Like so they can't look at documents, or they can't use free text data. So they're like different. There's like biomarkers or like how those things are like. But I think the biggest challenge for all of them, just like access to the right data,
Yes.
has been the hugest thing because, like, yes, you have patients within your four walls, but how are you getting all of the other patients
Yep.
that are outside of your walls, who are 80% of oncology patients are in the community, right?
Yep.
It's like that to me is like thinking about health equity. Like, how are we getting access truly to like the full population? So I think it's a fascinating way where like absolutely, I think like we're gonna need AI to do some of this stuff to mine that, but like that data access is just the biggest hurdle I think in some of that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're coming up on time, you guys. This has been a really, really good conversation. And I appreciate the time from both of you. But the last thing I like to ask people as we wrap these up is if you have a specific call to action for the industry, for a particular functional area, be as provocative or as you could drop a gauntlet for a group of people who you think they really need to step up. It's really sky is the limit. But what would be your call to action? And Joe, we could start with you. What would be your call to action for whoever to really move the needle in what you're passionate about in your career in your role in this industry?
Absolutely. So I think, be willing to take a risk. Often when we're looking at these, and I'll go back to technology, when we're looking at implementing these new technologies with a sponsor, they're very risk adverse. They want to do a single pilot that lasts, 6 months and, maybe we'll move forward after that. Well, as a site, we're investing heavily in making this work. We need you to as well. We've done the work. We've shown how the data that this works. Trust us and be our partner in implementing this, because this is why a lot of these technologies die on the vine, is because there's such a risk adverse culture around implementing new tech in clinical trials.
Awesome. And Denali?
Oh, I just want people to talk to each other. I want I want different site types to talk to each other. I want sponsors to talk to sites to sponsors. I want CROs to join the conversation. I mean, I think it's interesting. You see sites and sponsors are now coming to the table talking. There were not a whole lot of CROs in the mix because I think there's some different milestones that they're looking to gauge themselves against. But I just think folks are interested to actually talk to each other more and then listen.
Talk and listen. It sounds simple enough.
In theory.
Yeah. Well, thank you both again. I really appreciate your time. And Joe, thanks again for everything here at Summit and for joining the podcast. If you or someone you know would make for a great podcast guest, I would love to hear about them. You can reach us at unblindedpod@viva.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, we would really appreciate it. Leave a 5-star review. Leave us a comment if you enjoy the content. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff for the algorithm. We really appreciate it. Once again, thank you both for being here, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.